Let's look at the curriculum for a moment, because this is one that really trips a lot of people up with the Yoga Alliance application. So when you're deciding on what are you going to teach in the program, and if we have some examples here in the workbook of like things you're going to include and things you're not going to include, and we really could have probably done, 500 hours in the first one. And there was a certain point when we actually started planning out the daily schedule that we felt like, oh, if we cover this topic, it's going to be really rushed. And so Claire and I developed this saying where we're like, okay, we're going to have to save this for the 300 hour because you want to cover everything, but you want to cover it well in a way that people can absorb it. So here's some examples of topics you can consider. And all of these can fit into the Yoga Alliance core curriculum. So you can take one topic and it can kind of like, let's say you did chakras, for instance. Chakras could be under techniques, training, and practice. It actually lists it here under pranayama and subtle body categories. Here it is. So you can list it here, but if you tie in the chakras to, where they're located in the body, then you can start to tie it into a little bit of the anatomy, because maybe you could talk about, the root chakra, and then you're tying it into the bandhas, and you're tying it into your abdominal muscles and the diaphragm and the navel point. So you're not just teaching chakras as anatomy, but you're talking about it concurrently with anatomy. And you can apply one topic to many different core competencies. Okay. What often trips people up with the Yoga Alliance application is this is the Yoga Alliance guidebook from the Yoga Alliance website. And each one of these rows has to be filled in. So when you fill in the Yoga Alliance website, it's going to say under techniques, training, and practice, asana, historical context, what are you teaching? And you have to say, under historical context, I'm teaching 2 hours. And in what context will your training cover regarding the historical context of asana? You're going to say, in class 5, we are going to talk about the historical context for 30 minutes in this way. And then in class, this is how we did it for our application. In class hour 147, we're going to cover historical context as a review in this way. And so each one of these, you have to say how many hours and where it's happening and how you're covering it. So something like these ones poses specific to Yoga Alliance's lineage, your RYS's lineage. You're gonna, like, we just put in a list of all the poses. I think there were like 57 poses or something in our training. And we just listed them all because we wanted to give Yoga Alliance too much information rather than too little. And then, like, sometimes we would say it's going to be covered in every, for half an hour in every 4-hour lesson plan. We're going to be looking at a particular pose. And so we might list 45 hours on specific poses. So each one of these rows is a line of the Yoga Alliance application. And that seems to trip people up a lot. They don't realize, like, yeah, this is the exact information I have to provide. I think there's 49 core competencies. And so there's 49 entries where for each entry you have to say how many hours, who's teaching it, and describe basically what they're doing there. And when we wrote our descriptions, we just took what they said. How do you define complete sequencing of pranayama? We said, we define complete sequencing of pranayama by blah, blah, blah. To what alternatives and adaptations will trainees be introduced? And then, so we blah, blah, blah. Trainees will be introduced to these alternatives and these adaptations. Like, so just answer the question, and that will save people a lot of hassle with the Yoga Alliance application.
It's a little bit confusing because I don't know what they want to hear separately, or there should be like better to put more details. Like, I don't know, I have kind of two lines, not 2, 3 lines to describe each.
One thing we do is we actually put the page numbers in the manual. So you can
okay.
1 or 2 lines, and if they need more information, you can say see page X, and everywhere that it occurs where that topic is being taught, so that they can, because you do have to upload your Yoga Alliance manual as part of your application. So they have it, so they can reference your manual to see exactly what it is that you're teaching.
So you're not trying to give all the information about sequencing, for instance. It's a very interesting process because you're planning your daily schedule and your manual and your core competencies at the same time. So you kind of got these 3 balls in the air where because they want to know how many hours. Well, you don't know how many hours unless you're planning your daily schedule. So what helped for Claire and I was like, we kind of had a little bit of a routine for our trainer lesson plans where, you know, we did yoga, we did meditation, and we did some kind of philosophy or yoga lifestyle. I can't remember what that, yoga humanities or professional essentials. So pretty much every class we had, you know, techniques, training and practice every class, a little bit of anatomy every class, a little bit of lifestyle, philosophy and ethics, that idea of like alternate between sitting and standing kind of thing. So, and then we just would plug in different core competencies in each class.
I think just to recap, the 2 things that tripped me up the most were, number 1, as you said, Aruna, every core competency, they're not suggestions, they are required. So you do need to identify, you know, all of your information, and you know, your 200 hours has to fit somehow into all of those core competencies. And then the other part that it took me a while in development to get my head around was each topic might, even though it's one core competency, might fall into several educational categories. So it's not like we're talking about, as Aruna said, for example, chakras. We're talking about chakras, and in this core competency, therefore, chakras falls under yoga humanities. Okay, but chakras in the body, when we're talking about the endocrine system, so now it falls under also anatomy. And then if we were to practice, you know, here is a sequence to balance the root chakra. Well, now it's techniques, training, and practice. And then the practice teaching of that and holding space in the room for people going through a sequence to balance their root chakra might be teaching methodology, which falls under professional essentials. So you can, because once you take your 200 hours and try to fit try to assign an amount of time to a topic, you're going to find it's really, really difficult to then have the right amount of time in the educational categories. So you can split up one topic into 4 educational categories, or even practicum 5 educational categories, but 1 core competency. It's like a big Rubik's Cube that's impossible to put together. At the beginning, it gets there. It does get there, but that helped too, because we were way over in some categories and we thought this is impossible. And then we realized, okay, we need more hours in this category. Let's do some techniques training on this topic in this category. And that does, so it sounds overwhelming, but it's actually more helpful in the end.
It's also very helpful, like if you try to write the manual as you plan your daily schedule, like all that reflection time we talked about, if you think, okay, people are walking in on day 1, what are they going to do? And so then you're like, okay, I mean, in our training, we start with the sun salutation because it's kind of like it's, you know, not in Kundalini, but in other styles, it's kind of like a go-to move. So then it's like, okay, so we need the sun salutation written out for our manual. We need a description of all those poses. Maybe we start with the poses of the sun salutation, and then we look at how this sun salutation is sequenced. And then we think, okay, we want to have a reflection page for people. Like, how do you feel after doing the sun salutation? And then we want to have a little bit of sequencing, you know, or teaching methodology, cueing rather. That's what I was thinking of. So how do you cue the sun salutation? And so if you really think of like what's going to happen on day one, then your manual kind of writes itself because you kind of think, oh, like, here's the topics we need to cover. And so you're going to list like the topics you really, your must have, your what we call our need to have and our nice to have. So we started with our need to have topics. Like, we need, for us, for Hatha Yoga, we needed to have the sun salutation. And then what's everything that goes along with teaching that?